Hi, folks. Thank you again for coming on to Back to Basics for Season 3. Today, we're going to speak with Grace Della Rosa, and we're going to find out what she's all about. She was a guest on my show for Season 2, and we had a really great time. And today, we're going to have a wonderful time talking to her. There is a friend that we both lost, and we are going to be talking about grief and the support and the energy of how we're supposed to be handling ourselves with support or without. That's up to you to decide when you listen to the show. So let's stop talking to me and let's talk to our guest today, Grace Della Rosa. I'll see you there. Hey, folks, thank you again for coming on to Back to Basics for Season 3. Today we have a person who's been repeated from Season 2. Her name is Grace Della Rosa, and she's an amazing person. What we talked about last season, well, we won't get into that because I need you to listen to what we talked about. We talked about great stuff, by the way. And today we're going to talk about the friend that we have lost, a companion that we both have lost, and how to make that as a grieving in a happy way, if that makes sense. And it is a vibe, it is a energy that we both lost, and we definitely feel it. And now the question is, how do we motivate people from getting away from the sadness and the sorrowness into the happy mode that we should be? And that's what Back to Basics is all about. So why don't we bring Grace on here? Grace, how are you? And thank you again for coming on to Back to Basics.
Hi, Girish.
Hi. So before we get into the basics of this episode today and what we're going to be talking about, what does Back to Basic mean to you, Grace?
Oh, just coming back to the foundations of what life is all about, really. That's to me what it's all about, is just kind of focusing in on the innate things that were given to us as humans that bring us all together.
Yeah, Grace, thank you again, and whoever's listening here, and obviously you'll be seeing this on the pre-recorded, but we're also live even on Instagram, and they're going to be chit chatting with me. If there's any questions, I'll just go and ask through.
Oh, perfect.
So, Grace, you know, um, there's a friend of ours, both of us, who passed away, and I was on her show. She was on my show. I've been on her show several times. She's a podcaster also, but then she's also a radio host. And you were also on that guest. And that's how you and I connected. And then we became friends offline. How does it feel when you find someone close to you? Maybe not that close because I really don't know how close you were. But if
Yeah.
you understand what I'm trying to say is that you connected her through email and phone numbers and all that fun stuff. How do you feel now after finding out that we lost a person a couple of weeks back?
Yes. Well, of course, when I saw the news and it was on social media, I'm so grateful for social media in that respect. Um, I learned from her husband's post on Facebook that we lost her suddenly and unexpectedly, and she was uh, younger than myself.
Mm.
So, what I loved most about her was her passion with mental health, and suicide. These really deep, dark things that really matter today, more than ever.
Yeah, the show that we're talking about is Moments of Clarity, and 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 that was about mental health. That was about in a good way, in a bad way, mental health, and it's something that we don't usually talk about. I've talked about the struggles that I went through back in 2009 when I lost my dad, and then slowly we connected, not because of the story that I was told, but the journey that I went through my podcast also. So I think we both exchanged notes when it comes to that. That is a safe space, and I don't know where other spaces are there, Grace. So, what are your thoughts on bringing a good vibe to someone's sorrowness and sadness? What is the first thing that we should be doing?
The first thing we should be doing is allowing everybody to be able to express their grief in whatever way they choose to, and acknowledge that where they're at is where they're at. And then the second thing is to not judge on where the people are at in terms of their grief.
mm,
First, we have to understand that the grief is there because we're missing their physicality.
mm,
And once we're able to see that and acknowledge that that's where we're at, we allow our bodies to start healing instantaneously when we acknowledge and affirm
mm,
what's right in front of us, which
mm,
could be the sadness or the grief or whatever like that may be. And then as time goes on, hopefully one will be able, for me, I like to look back and think of the laughter and how excited she was when we connected, about talking about all things related to mental health and, the psychic abilities, the mediumship, things of that nature, where we're talking about energetic exchange
mm,
is where we went. But because not many people are really of the understanding of that, we delved into the back side of that, which is more, why do you suppose that is, that people are only able to understand this much of life and not want to understand or be able to understand this side of it?
mm,
Like religion, for instance. They
mm,
know what they know because of the religion. So they're not many times able to veer outside of what they have learned.
mm.
You know, it's hard.
It is very, very hard. I mean, we won't go details on the religion side, but let me just ask you this, right? Because there are different aspects from Christianity and Hinduism and Sikhism and Islam and all the other religions out there, and their beliefs are a little different, right? For example, Hinduism, which I can speak for because I am a Hindu, right? Um, there's an afterlife after when you pass away.
Hmm.
Probably there isn't for Christianity. Probably there isn't for Islam, right? So how do you channelize religion versus death, if that makes sense?
For me, it's spirituality.
Okay.
Spirituality is where I go. That's why I say I'm not religious anymore,
Mm,
although I really appreciate all that the different religions offer. I like to look at the web that connects all of those beautiful traditions
mm,
and extricate that into what I call spirituality. We can be religious and not be spiritual,
mm,
and we
yeah,
could be in the spiritual realm and not be spiritual. So from my own experience, being able to have seen both sides of it, I know that that is a fact, and so we just talk about humans. For me, that's a lot easier than trying to segregate us from one in these different categories. But with death, I'm of the same. I'm of not only the same belief, but the experiencing, the understanding of life eternal. When I think of Christians, they talk always about life eternal. So I don't understand why it's hard for them to understand what you and I are talking about. What
right.
do they think life eternal is?
Yeah, yeah, that is so true. You, Grace, thank you again for explaining that. And I usually do quotes at the end of the episode, and I will do that today. But there is another quote which I actually read, and I thought I had to say that. Grieving doesn't make you imperfect; it makes you human. Now, do you think that's true? I mean, because grieving, you know, it seems like a different energy that you get into, and being human is grieving, or grieving is human. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I love that. Grieving is human, but I've also seen animals grieving.
Mm,
I've seen my puppies grieve when they've lost one of theirs, one of their siblings. And so I feel grieving is a beautiful space as long as we don't stay there. Grieving to me is kind of the barometer of how one misses or loves that person that has passed on. And the thing is even though we may understand the fact that life is eternal, that all we do is really change forms of energy.
mm,
Really is all it is. Just like water evaporating becomes steam. The water is always there. It's just in a different form. And when we're unable to see that form, when when we have somebody close to us die and we have to face that term death, it, I feel, awakens one's own mortality.
Mm-hmm.
And so fear can set in many different ways. You know, maybe they'll start drinking because they're sad or depressed. But in all actuality, that's fear. It's fear of one's own death. That's why they think, oh my gosh, you know, but really it's the body's way of defending itself from being too fearful of that.
Mm-hmm. Grace, thank you again for that. I was listening to one of the interviews earlier this morning. Nothing about grief. It was just that they were in a different space, a mental space, and the word that they were gonna be using is depression, and depression is considered a disease. So he's never used depression in his vocabulary or in his life. Now, what is a word am I supposed to be using? Not not depression, because I don't know if I'm depression or depressed for that matter. Does that make sense? Because
Yes.
so what is a word that we should be using, and how do we get away from the word depression?
Well, it's different. You know, when we grieve, we're just mourning the loss of that which is. When we're depressed, it's, I believe, a loss of hope,
Hmm.
you know? And that's where that energy changes. You know, we talk about energy a lot, and just the nuance of the difference of those two words is very important for us to understand. So the grieving is just the detaching, the learning something new is what is going to happen. You know, we had a life, a season with somebody, and now we don't. The new normal is going to be really unexpected. We don't know what that new normal is, right? Um, I don't think one needs to get away from the word depression. Depression is real. And once we can understand that it's okay to grieve, it's not okay to stay in the grief, it's not okay to start isolating. When we start realizing that, um, isolating is okay during the grieving process. Do you know back in the day, the women used to wear black to connote that they are in mourning. And I feel sometimes that today that might even be a really good thing to bring back so people can give the respect due to somebody who's going through the grieving process, you know, allowing them that opportunity to really just reacclimate into real life without that person.
Mm.
That's why I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over
No, no,
you.
no, please, please. No, go ahead.
That's why I find that two lovebirds, a husband and a wife and a wife, however way you want to look at that, two lovers, two good friends, you know, that have been spending so much time together. When one dies, it makes it so much harder if they don't continue to have a life of their own outside of that relationship.
Mm.
It's just so imperative to have one's own life.
Mm.
And
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, let me ask you this here.
yeah,
Um, the death of our friend who passed away, right? According to us, it's a sudden death.
yes.
Okay, maybe for them it's a planned death. I really, really don't know, but I think what we both know is a sudden death. Do you think it makes it easier when it's planned versus a sudden death?
That's a good question, and one that I'd asked myself before because I come across, you know, uh, clients whose loved ones had passed, but their death was planned.
Hmm.
And then I have many clients, of course, whose loved ones or whatever acquaintances, colleagues have passed, and they were not planned.
Hmm.
And for me, our body doesn't cannot discern whether it's planned or unplanned. It's the emotion that comes in is what matters. It's whatever that emotion is going to change here,
Hmm.
here.
Mm,
and our gut as well, all of those areas.
mm,
And now there's always going to be exceptions to the rules. I don't want people to go, well, that's not what happened to me. I get it. Everybody's got their own experience, but in general, the same feelings will come, even though you know that your grandmother, I'm just saying, that your grandmother's going to supposedly die in 10 years because she's had this thing going on and she's sitting well with it.
mm,
Well, okay, but when she dies, when she is no longer here, you might feel a sense of relief maybe because now she's not in any pain
mm, mm.
or whatever. But I coming back to your question and just honing in on that, I don't feel that there's a difference in the knowing or the not knowing. In fact, I feel actually I take that back. There's a slight difference when you know, and not always, but when one knows, because I have a colleague who just told me he has 3 years to live. That's what the doctors told him. Literally, young man, probably in his late 30s, maybe
Mm,
30s, maybe early 40s, if that. And he is so resilient. He is happy. He's passionate. He's driven because now he knows what he wants to accomplish before those 3 years are up.
mm.
And then you have those that will pass because they're so depressed. We take that word depressed again because they can't get over that grief,
Mm.
knowing that their life is now going to be shortened.
Yeah, Grace, thank you again for that. And we'll get to the other segments in a good tone. So we'll talk about that. There's a new segment that we started in season 3, which is the rapid fire round, and you have not been in part of that.
No.
And there are some few words or sentences that whatever I ask you and whatever comes in your head, we'll just go from there. How about that?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So the first word is going to be grieve.
Just what we've been talking about, grief, barometer.
Okay. Sorrow.
Hmm. I don't know why, but all of a sudden I just saw a daffodil.
Okay. Uh,
Sorrow.
energy.
Hmm. These are tough for me right now. Girish, energy, um, extensive.
Okay. Now, in the world we have 4 elements. Uh,
Mhm.
what are the 4 elements do you think that you resonate with?
Oh, water right away. Water, fire,
Okay. Um,
those two. Water, fire, earth,
okay. Spiritual.
eternal,
Okay. Hope.
life,
Okay. Trauma.
recovery,
Mental health.
happiness,
Detached.
isolated,
Tiffany.
joyful,
Moments of clarity.
fun.
Okay. Grace is
You mean the word grace or my name grace? Me.
whatever comes in your head. Whatever comes. Yeah, go for it.
Grace is unmerited,
Okay. And the last one is going to be back to basics.
the foundation of life.
Awesome. Grace, thank you again for playing the rapid fire round. This is one of the rapid fires that people are really enjoying, and thank you again for that.
Yes, that was fun.
Grace, let me ask you this. We've talked about the sorrowness when it comes to grieving, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And when we go to, I'm going to say celebration because that's how I see it. Celebrate a person who was there in our lives. how no matter how we connected, it could be your family member, your friends, or colleague, or whoever it is. Do you consider that as a celebration versus a sorrowness?
Yes,
Okay. And why is that? Why do you say that?
a celebration of life for me, um, because that, being human, being in the human form is in itself a true gift. It's a gift that one will never be able to experience again,
Mm,
because the minute they transmute from this physical form into our normal form of energy,
mm,
one that can shift whatever way you wish. This is kind of the winning lotto number when we can experience all that we experience as a human. Um, to me, that's full celebration. Why would I not celebrate that?
mm,
And any life, any life, all life should be celebrated. All life.
mm. Grace, thank you again. I've been saying this since season one and even season three for that matter. Um, you know, Lost my dad in 2009, thinking that I lost him and whatnot. The way I have channelized myself is that I think I'm very lucky to have a third date to go and celebrate him. You have your birthday, obviously, that you celebrate him. Then obviously you have a Father's Day, which is the national holiday, kind of for me. And the third is going to be the day that he passed away from the earth. So I feel those are three special dates that I have that I celebrate that. Do you feel that's the right channelization that I have in order to get away from the soreness?
For you, I mean, I'm just feeling your energy. And for you, yes, I feel like that works for you very well. I feel it serves your purpose in being able to be joyful and getting away from the sorrow, When we think of all the sadness, times when we have been, uh, when something happened that was unexpected in an unexpected way,
Mm,
that sorrow, that depression can lead to sorrow.
mm,
Um, I take that back. You don't even need depression for sorrow. In fact, sorrow is in and of itself its own thing. Sorrow is just looking back for me, feeling the inequities that one feels when they don't get what it is that they wanted from that relationship. Maybe a few more days longer together, maybe they realize that the person that left, because we're talking about death, that left had a facade the whole time, and maybe they learned something about them right before they passed, and now they're sorrowful. Like,
mm,
what is that?
mm.
You know, when
Yeah.
they
So Grace, thank you again for that. And I've channelized in something, and it took me a long time to get where I am today, honestly. And I'm glad that I did. Uh, I think I'm kind of the lucky ones, I guess, because speaking with you and speaking with all my guests, I think has made me a better person. I'm very, very fortunate that way. But there are people who are around us, and that is why I wanted this episode, that to help people to listen through this episode and give them a little joy as much as I can.
Mm,
So whoever's listening right now, and whenever this episode is released, please pause for at least a minute or two. Give yourself a tap on the back, because it seems like we all need to give some type of positive energy with this sorrowness that we're all going through, and we are eventually going to go through that. And if no one has gone through that, think of this here. There was a friend of mine who was never there for me during my dad's passing. I
mm,
thought that was a wrong thing. But then I realized that some people, they just want to be silent from far away to give you good energy from far away.
mhm,
So think of it from from that aspect that people are thinking of you no matter what. Grace, so what are your thoughts on this statement here? Do you think that we should take things personally when someone doesn't really say sorry, or because they have never gone through it, or should they do what?
It almost seems as if that person might be lacking, could be lacking even a sense of compassion even. But I like your perspective. I like thinking that maybe they're giving you that space and being silent. Sometimes silence is the gift, and
Mm,
it's a hard gift to give sometimes.
mm,
So I do like what you said about that. It could also be a sense because maybe they don't know how to communicate with somebody who's lost somebody else.
mm,
I One of the things that I can relate to is what I felt like when I was going through my cancer, my colon cancer uh,
mm,
uh, treatment, where I felt like I was going to die. And had I looked at my survival rate, it would have been 13%
mm,
back in those days. And what I did was allowed myself to grieve, to cry for about 10 minutes each day if I felt like it.
mm.
But after those 10 minutes were done, that was it. I was not going to give myself any more time
Of
to
course.
wallow in self-pity. There's so much more ahead of us. Why not take advantage of it?
Mm,
The only thing that's wallowing in self-pity, which is totally different from sorrow. But
mm,
wallowing in self-pity is when, you can start off in sorrow and then you become wallowing in that self-pity and you get stuck in there. It's a
mm,
lie.
mm,
It's taking one away from the rest of the life that's left. The only difference between one that knows and one that doesn't is so thin. That veil is so thin, like we were talking about earlier.
mm.
But anyways, I digress.
No, 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 you're totally fine. Grace, thank you again for coming on to season 3 on Back to Basics. But before you leave today, do you
Yes.
have any last words to all my Back to Basic listeners? And then how was your journey on Back to Basics too? On top of that, which is the second part of Back to Basics for you.
Yes, this was totally unexpected. You and I just reconnected and said, let's come back on and talk about Tiffany. I just hear her. I actually felt her energy and know that she's doing very well over there, very surrounded by a lot of her loving friends, relatives, things of that nature. I love that. I love knowing that she's happy. She's happy. This could be another podcast for us, Girish, when we talk about maybe the life ever after on that side over there, where we talk about what happens on that side. But here, last few words is be true to what you're feeling. Allow yourself to resonate with whatever it is you're feeling in that moment. Just don't wallow in it. Don't wallow in it, because that's where the lie is. That's where it's going to want to keep you there. That force, that energy. Um, and when you realize that that's what's happening, as you continue to heal, I, I, I have a feeling that you will be more resilient than ever before, and look at these as times of experience that only humans can really feel and process. I don't know how the dogs are processing it. I do know it's very similar to ours, but I've not heard a dog literally speak to me. So I can just go by their energy, and they do feel what we do. In
Mm,
fact, in fact, I feel that the animals are saying, thank you all for finally catching up with us, using your feelings instead of your logic and intellect, because
mhm,
that's where the true foundation, the being back to basic of being human lies, is
mm,
feeling and emoting and
mm,
being 100% honest with
mm,
the other person.
mm,
Instead of trying to keep a stiff upper lip, why
mm,
not say, I'm here for you.
mm,
I'm here for you. And allow them to cry if they want with no judgment. I feel for men They were raised to not show emotion, many. And that's the demise of many of you, because that's how you were raised, until you realize that you can step out of that and allow yourself to start feeling and emoting that to the people you trust.
Mm.
It's a really good thing. That's why women live so much longer than men, because we emote, men don't. So that's a holistic wellness tip 101 for all of you. It's okay to feel what you feel and share that. In fact, that would be your superpowers if you can do that.
Grace, thank you again for coming here and sharing all the nuggets. And I definitely do share, by the way, just an FYI. But Grace, thank you again for coming here and sharing those nuggets. And definitely you and I will be friends even after this. And we always have been. And hopefully you and I will come up with the Grace 3.0, because the 2.0 is today. So thank you again for coming here.
Thank you, Girish. Thank you.
Thank you. Guys, today we spoke with Grace, right? And we talked about the toughest topic that I could talk about is grieving. Now, we did talk about the soreness, we did talk about the energy, and we did talk about the happiness and the celebration of what we have lost a friend. And she's a person that I've actually learned a lot from. And now she's not there. So now the question is, where do I go for guidance? Because when we lose someone, we try to find someone who gives us guidance. Your father, your mom, your sister, your brother, your friends. Could be anybody, but keep that in mind too. Now, as usual, as always, there's a quote of the day from Back to Basics, and we already gave a quote in the middle of the episode, but there's another one. And here's a quote. The quote is, "Tears shed for another person are not a sign of weakness. They are the sign of pure heart." Just like what you said, crying is not a bad thing. Sharing feelings is not a bad thing. Share and caring, I think that's what I usually do, is we should talk to each other just to make it stronger day by day, because we're trying to build a community, a Back to Basic community, and that's what it is. Guys, thank you again for coming on Back to Basics, and we're almost done with the season 3, and hopefully we'll be giving you more joy and more episodes just like these on Back to Basics. I'll see you there. Bye. How was that?
That was fun, and that was quick, and it flowed.
It did, didn't it?
Yeah, there's so much more I'd like to share, but that's how it goes with these podcasts.
Hi guys, thank you again for tuning in to Back to Basics and listening to the excellent episode that we had today with our guest. With your love and support, we do need you to at least rate our show, review our show, because it does make us stronger day by day, week by week, as I usually say on my episodes. And there are 3 things in this episode that it makes a hit for me, which is the content, the guest, and definitely the host. So guys, take care, God bless, and remember, everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care, God bless, and see you next time on Back to Basics.